I know our message isn't for everybody, but by God, the ones that it is for, we're going to freaking wage war on radical change. We're going to get after it because that's what you have to do.
Good morning, everyone. This is Tony Falzone, a Motivated Medic. Today's episode is a very special one about Daniel Mills as he talks about going from wanderer to warrior. So stay tuned. Hey, this is Tony with the Motivated Medic. I've got a pretty snazzy guest on today, and we're gonna talk about some pretty deep stuff. Everything from challenges and struggles that some of us have had in our lives, and we're going to be hearing from the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Daniel Mills. So, dude, welcome to the podcast.
It's time to wage war.
Absolutely. So we've titled this From Wanderer to Warrior, and this is kind of a biography of you, and I know you've told your story a bunch of times from the speaking platform, but I wanted to have kind of a kick your feet up conversation, nice leather back chairs. Let's have a real conversation with some detail on kind of a background of you. Where you started with your life from your childhood, which, you and I have talked multiple times about the challenges there, and to, transitioning to even a trip to the cath lab, and then to where you are today.
Well, it all started.
It's way back in my day.
Back in 1983 on a cool brisk. Yeah. I want to do something in your honor. I don't know if you can hear this.
Oh, boy. That's awesome.
Good.
Good. For any of those of you that don't know, I'm a huge Jocko Go fan. And if you don't know what that is, Google Jocko Go. Oh, and my Google just... Stupid phone.
Order more.
Yeah, right. I think I'm good at the moment.
I think you are, because I have a picture of a... what most people would use as a beer fridge or a wine fridge full of Jocko Go force multiplier. So, like I said, man, I appreciate your friendship and having me on. But I grew up in a typical suburban broken household. A lot of emotional, mental, sexual abuse. Physical abuse, just a crazy upbringing. I mean, a lot better than most. We never wanted really financially, but just a lot of disorder and dis-ease and unhealthy, just unhealthy childhood. That kind of sent me down a wayward path. A lot of people know I was in a gang for 6 years. Some people you hear jokingly enough, people like Jocko and some of the ones that you were at the fork in the road and decided to take the right path. I decided to take the wrong path. Was in a gang for 6 years, was homeless, right after high school, just kind of bouncing couch to couch. And I met a buddy of mine who I'm actually still friends with today. He was in the same lifestyle, and his name is Cato. And he told me about a fire department volunteer live-in program. I didn't know. Kind of at that point, I was just kind of couch surfing, sleeping in my car. And I went in October of 2002 to meet with Captain Wayne Shirley, at the fire department, and I kind of told him my story, and he gave me a shot, and that's how was the beginning of my career in fire and EMS. He told me to show up on A shift. I had to ask him what A shift meant. um, and they allowed the fire department that I started at had a live-in program. And for those of you who don't know, you actually live at the fire station. You work a scheduled shift. You do a bunch of other duties and stuff like that. And they basically give you free room and board. So literally the day I moved into the fire station, I was homeless. Like, all my stuff was in my truck. I was kind of, away from family and isolated from family and stuff like that. So that's kind of where, how I got started. They, Captain Shirley and a young man named Warren Knight, both kind of took a chance on me, saw something. I'm not sure what they saw, but they saw something. And, that's how I initially got into the fire service. So I moved in, never left. And almost 19 years later, here we are.
And you're still living at the station.
I have not left, but they don't know.
Same underwear.
They don't know I'm here. So I'm actually in a broom closet now. No, yeah, I did that for about almost 4 or 5 years, and it really, I still had tons of struggles in those 4. This is not a princess, somebody come and kissed me on the lips and woke me up, but it got me off the streets and, somewhat kind of kept me, ish in line.
So you enter the fire service, and now there's, you had, was this prior to your military experience or after?
It was prior. So I joined the military the end of 2004, beginning of 2005, because of Warren Knight. And you'll probably hear me talk about Warren Knight a lot. Like that movie quote, what we do in this life echoes throughout eternity. Mm. Warren Knight was that guy for me. A lot of people always discounted me or just due to my past, especially, being in a gang and all that, which I've always been very open about, and we know how a lot of people in our career field are. That's not a widely accepted, resume topic in fire and EMS. And I wasn't always accepted, on top of I'm a pretty, brash and open guy, but, Warren Knight is probably one of the greatest human beings that I have ever met in my entire life. He's like, he embodies, compassion and empathy and love, forgiveness, mentorship. Like he is my Jocko. And he took me under his wing, his arm, his foot a few times. It was a very abusive relationship in a good way. But Warren mentored me, and Warren was also a Fleet Marine Force Navy corpsman stationed with an anti-terrorism battalion. He deployed to Fallujah in 2004, and while he was gone, we very much had a father adopted son relationship, and I wanted to emulate what Warren was doing. So I decided to join the military, the same unit that he was in while he was in Fallujah. And that's kind of how I got started in the military, was, just trying to do what Warren was doing.
So you were in, so you got in, you enlisted, 2004, you said?
Yeah.
And then you were in for how many years?
I did 8 years.
your 8 year contract? How many what active? Were they all active, or were you like
I
6
did.
active, 2
I did
reserve?
active and reserve time. Even when I was on reserve, I was doing what they called FTS, and that was full time
Hmm.
support. Um,
Okay.
and I was the battalion education guy, so I would get to go around. I guess the backstory to that, if a lot of people don't know, the United States Marine Corps doesn't have their own medical or religious personnel. So you join the Navy, you go through Navy boot camp, Navy Corps School or Corpsman School. It's basically like a watered down EMT, LPN type thing, and then you volunteer to go to the Marines. So once you do that, you basically sign your life away. You go to either Camp Lejeune or Camp Pendleton on the West Coast and go through Field Medical Training Battalion, which is basically where Marines get to just kick the piss out of corpsmen for 8 to 10 weeks.
This is how it's gonna be.
Yeah, my Staff Sergeant Jimenez ran mine. I'll never forget him. He's a former recon weapons chief, and he broke us for 9 weeks. He was a very intense, scary dude, but that's basically where you learn, combat medicine, all the rules, regulations, traditions of the Marine Corps. And basically, you are indoctrinated into the Marine Corps. You're still a Navy corpsman, but you rate the United States Marine Corps uniform, not the blues, but the Charlies. And anytime Marines go anywhere in the world, they take Navy corpsmen with them. We honor, or we earn the honor of being called Doc if you're a good one. If you're a turd bag, then they just call you by your name. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I went to anti-terrorism battalion. Stayed there, I guess about 4.5, 5 years. I went to a HIMARS missile battery. Say that 5 times fast at 7 o'clock in the morning. Missile battery unit, kilo battery. I went to 323 Marines, an infantry company, and then ended up with the Marine Corps Training Advisory Group up in Virginia with the Joint Special Operations Task Force. We did a bunch of advisory teaching type stuff to foreign military units, and I got to travel to a few places in Africa and the Middle East and Spain, and got to go to some cool places, some not so cool places. But for a reservist, I got to see a bunch, and then in between all that, I would come home and be riding the fire engine and the ambulance for 24 to 48 hours at a piece.
Now, is it not when you were deployed? That's kind of where you, I guess, got into the patient care aspect of things, as far as enjoying it and wanting to do more in that arena.
Yeah, I wanted to go deeper. So when I went to, we call it MCTAG, but it's the Marine Corps Training and Advisory Group, and it was a new unit stood up in Virginia Beach back in 2010, and it's here, but I think it's been disbanded now. But it was a pretty high speed unit. We would embed with indigenous forces, teach them, basic infantry, CQB tactics. And I got to teach a lot of medical stuff. But I went to a Will Willis course, is also known as Whiskey. Is a former 75th Ranger Regiment, pararescueman, all that. And he taught a advanced combat trauma management course. And at this time, I was a paramedic. I was not a good paramedic, but I was a paramedic. I carried a patch and a pulse. And I went through this course, and it just opened my eyes to a lot that I did not know. He talked about the trauma triad of death. And back in 2009, you didn't hear about the trauma triad of death in EMS. Talked about it. Just, I felt just very unprepared, and going on a deployment to where I was the main medical provider. I was the team chief or the medical team chief for my guys, and I got to do everything from patient exams to long term patient care, waiting on to evac a civilian or something, and I just really enjoyed the in-depth critical care type aspect of patient care, as opposed to what you and I have both grown up in, from being an ambulance guy to the fire department, to where we'd have them for 15 to 45 minutes and we dump them off.
Yep. So you got out of the military, and what was that transition point to saying, you know what, I'm done. Let me go ahead and focus on this career, or was that it? Where it was like, I want to do this more in depth, and so that was the transition point. Which I know why you're laughing because of where we're at now, but we'll get there here in a minute.
I went on a twilight deployment in 2010. During that deployment, I went through a really nasty, ugly, traumatic divorce while I was deployed, which is always fun. When I came back, I had lost honor and integrity in all aspects. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a recovering addict. From alcohol and prescription pills, but I fell, when I came back, I fell victim to the VA. I was just having a lot of trouble sleeping, the trauma of going through a very public within our career field divorce, and, just wasn't handling life well. And I lost my honor and integrity. I was drinking. I was getting high on Xanax, Klonopins, Percocets, Lortabs, Flexeril. I was drinking every day, every night. I wasn't drinking at work. I always have to put that caveat. But I would, leave the bar at 5, stop by Waffle House, and go to work. So I might as well have been drinking at work. But I did another deployment in 2012, September of 2012. And I just knew, my life was falling apart. Like I said, I had zero integrity. I was lying to everybody, just trying to cover my tracks, and cover, the typical addict behavior. And I knew that I wanted just to get out, because I had zero honor, and I don't feel like being in the military and not having honor or integrity and lying all the time, just trying to cover your bases, because eventually that train comes to an end. I'd always had a really good reputation for being a provider and an educator, and all my evals were 5.0s, which is the highest eval you can get, and my awards, and I promoted quick. But then there was the side of me when you clock out and you're snorting a Loratab in your car in the parking lot of the base. And as a lot of people know, when you have multiple, not multiple personalities in the eyes of like schizophrenia, but when you have multiple identities, they conflict, and that conflict leads to resistance, and resistance leads to disturbance and dis-ease. And, it just eventually started coming out. In 2012, I was arrested for assault with a weapon. Got in a bar fight, and it just, like, the house of cards started kind of falling, and I knew I needed to make some changes. So, with the arrest, I wasn't eligible for, re-upping in the military. So I just decided to get out because I didn't want anybody to know kind of what all was going on. But
Yeah, because you would have had to go through that whole process of, I guess, appeal and everything else, or
oh well, yeah, and I mean it. With that, with any type of assault, regardless of the circumstances behind it, because there are circumstances that we don't have to get into today, but regardless of the circumstance, an assault charge is not viewed favorably in the military, especially with what I did. Um, but it is what it is. It's part of the journey. But so I decided to get out. In between all of that, I was next in line to get hired for my dream job, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I decided at that time, and it wasn't as much the military; it was just my personal life that was just causing me a lot of trauma and drama and disease.
okay. So at this point, you're transitioning from basically a career in the military to somewhat civilian life. You're back with the fire department again at this point.
Yeah, and I'd never left. So being at that point, I was always just back and forth from the fire department to the military. I'd go on orders and come back, which my chief hated me for. I was just trying to live multiple lives. But yeah, when I got out, I was still a firefighter paramedic. I was teaching a good bit, and this was back in 2012. With that, the kind of that fire, as a paid homage to you, is that fire that I had from the military. I wanted to fly, and um, I had about 5, almost 6 years of ground critical care transport experience. I actually started, you know, my critical care experience as an EMT basic driving the children's and UAB critical care truck as a driver. And that kind of, with that in the military, fueled it to where I was like, I want to fly. Like, that's all I want to do. I don't really care about being a fireman. After 12 years, I think I'd been to maybe 6 fire department courses, and I had about 15 to 12 EMS type courses and certifications. So
Nice.
I noticed on a house fire one night, it was raining pretty hard, and the Mother Nature put the fire out for us. And I was like, well, if Mother Nature can do this job, I want to go do something else. I'm just kidding. Whatever.
Have you seen Fire Department Chronicles' recent video with itself?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Just being a fireman, like, one, I never really fit in with people. I don't fit in with people anyway. And I fought that for a long time, but just being a fireman was just super boring to me. Like, just the way my intellect works, like, if I'm not being challenged, I'm going to turn into a huge turd. And, it just is what, like, you got to be honest. And I always enjoyed working on the ambulance. I enjoyed the patient care. I enjoyed the fast pace. That just fit my personality. So I got hired finally after a couple of years of trying and not succeeding. Finally, at the end of 2012, I got the call. My old boss, Eddie West, called me and offered me a job at my dream program, and that was Lifesaver Helicopter in Birmingham. They were a 30-plus year legacy program, one of the first in the Southeast. I think next to Erlanger and Georgia Air Life. I think that was kind of the trio. But I got to go to Caraway, and Caraway Hospital is where I was born, where I grew up watching helicopters take off and land.
That's awesome.
The first time I saw Lifesaver land on Highway 280, I was like, I have to work there. And I got the call, and my life was still, my personal life was still just an absolute zoo. and still battling addiction. But as the fire department did in '02, the helicopter gave me reprieve for a while and gave me something to focus on. So, I did like everybody does, and dove headfirst into critical care medicine and flying, one of the busiest bases in the Southeast. And I freaking fell in love with it. I really did. And, I got to do something that, 0.1% of people in EMS get to do. And not only that, I was at a legacy program, flying 4 to 5 flights a shift, and intubating 2 and 3 some days. I mean, for a medic, you just can't ask for any more than that,
No, you're absolutely correct. And you're also, as you're doing this, you're also getting more into the education aspect and teaching. And that's kind of what I know what kind of got you into a little bit more of a speaking role, but you became a very prolific educator, especially in Alabama.
Yeah, prolific, pissing people off. I've never really gotten along with people because I guess I'm more of the David Goggins philosophy, and reading his book really opened my eyes to, why I don't get along with people real well. But yeah, I started working in research in 2014 in trauma neuro research. I worked for the Research Outcomes Consortium at UAB, and UAB is the level 1, education facility, level 1 trauma, surgery, all that in Birmingham. And when I really started getting into, and I'd been teaching, tactical medicine and, ACLS and PALS and ITLS and all that for, a good many years. But I really noticed what really lit my fire was working in research. And we would fly a patient in on a Monday, and we were doing the PROSH, pre-hospital blood study. We were doing the BLAST study where we were monitoring lactates. And the cool thing about my job at the hospital is I would get to follow patients that I brought in.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we rounded in the ER. We rounded in all the ICUs, trauma, burn, surgical ICU, neuro. We did pediatric CSF meningitis studies. So I got to go to children's, which was next door. Like it was, a huge eye-opening education moment for me. But I would get to, so what really lit it with education was my love for sepsis. And anybody that knows me, whoever's listening to this that knows me is rolling their eyes right now. I would fly somebody in, let's say on a Monday, and I would notice on Thursday they would die. And, not everybody, but there was a good bit that I had intubated on scene. And I started picking the brains of the anesthesia guys and a lot of the residents and attendings and, looking at ventilator-acquired pneumonia and bronchial injuries and, really looking at sepsis and just being in the ER, and UAB sees thousands of patients a day through the ER, and seeing piss poor medical care from my brothers and sisters brought in from the air and ground, misplaced misplaced tubes in the gut and, mismanaged trauma, and bringing patients in trauma naked with, 2 bags of normal saline, just busting. I just saw, not everybody, but just the majority, I saw very unhealthy, EMTs and paramedics, sleep deprived, coming in with piss poor medical care.
And that, I know, because I know you have a huge passion for correcting that, at least providing the information, the resources to give people the opportunity to correct their behavior and their care.
And that doesn't always make you popular, as you know, and have found out. Like when watching people come in. That's why I started teaching my difficult airway course back in 2013. Not only from stuff I saw, and anybody that's been through my airway course, I had 3 failed airways on the helicopter. I intubated hundreds on the helicopter, but I had 3 failed airways that have stuck with me since. And this was before we had video laryngoscopy and all that. But, so it really lit a passion for me to make it better than I found it. That puts you on the number 1 hit list of the majority of management and, fire chiefs and stuff like that, because with my personality, I'd be like, hey, your guys are bringing in patients tubed in the gut. This is unacceptable.
Yeah.
You're bringing in trauma patients, GSWs completely naked, genitals hanging out, rolling through the main pod of the ER. And they've had, 3,000 cc's of normal saline, which we all know is acid in a bag.
Yep.
Cardiac arrest completely mismanaged. Like, I just saw so much, and it just really just pissed me off. And trying to make it better. And, we started teaching sepsis lectures that we taught all over the Southeast. We started talking about the trauma triad of death, which I got to teach that all over the Southeast. Working in research, the department that I worked in also houses the U.S. Special Operations medical guys. So,
nice.
All the PJs, Army 18 Deltas and stuff like that came through UAB because we had such a high call volume of penetrating trauma. So I even got to start teaching for those guys and learning, as much as I taught, and doing a lot of stuff with them that we can't talk about, but a lot of training and courses and labs, and I learned just as much as I ever taught any of those guys, because they have thousands of years more experience than I do or will ever have. But yeah, it really just lit a fire in me for education, and getting to fly and seeing, back then we just weren't doing as good of a job as we could.
Yeah.
And luckily enough, in 2013-ish, we got a new educator at Air Methods. Lifesaver was owned by Air Methods. A stunning debonair young man named Eric Bauer. And Eric's education, along with Alan Wolf, really just opened my eyes to a lot. Like, they were going over stuff that I had never heard in medic school. And it just further pushed me to want to, change EMS from the education level.
So as you're transitioning here and really starting to dig in on the education side and getting more in depth with critical care, there were some other things going on in your personal life with your health and your well-being, or lack thereof, as I know you'll go into detail. Start diving into what was going on behind the scenes when it came to, I guess, where you were at with that, and how that led you down a pretty dark road.
Yeah, the entire time, doing all this cool high speed stuff, I was losing the addiction battle. My addiction was getting a lot more uncontrollable. As anybody knows, when pills grab a hold of you, no matter what they are, they get a deep hold. And you can fake the funk, you can lie, you can cheat, you can steal, you can, try to cover your tracks, but eventually you're going to get caught. Now, let me preface this by saying I didn't fail a drug test. I never stole drugs from work. I was not one of these flight medics banging ketamine, in the hangar. I just, at work, and even people that, absolutely hate the sound of my name will tell you when it came time to do business, I was one of the best. And when my patients were dropped off, they were better than when I found them, mentally, physical, whatever. They were better. And I was working at the hospital. I was working on the ambulance full time. I was flying full time. I was also the vice president of the Alabama EMS Association, teaching full time. Nonstop.
You had it going on
Nonstop professionally. Yeah. I was teaching classes all over the U.S., flying up to Fort Bragg, teaching classes for, some Navy guys, Air Force guys. I mean, I was, I was fast lining my career and doing a lot of good stuff. We were teaching, regional education days for ground providers and doing our, airway classes and lectures and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But you can ride that train to hell only for so long. And I was flying in August of 2014. Started having chest pain. Coming back, we did 3 or 4 flights that day, and I was super gassed, like super short of breath. I didn't feel well. It was pouring sweat. I thought, it's August in Alabama. If you've ever been in Alabama in August, it's not,
it's hot.
Yeah, it's hot. And flight suits are fashion anomalies. In the summertime, it's like you're wearing a wool sock, and in the wintertime, those, that thing
unbelievable.
It can stop a fart. But it definitely can't stop COVID. I'm just kidding. I was real short of breath, trying to chart. I couldn't keep my head up. I told my partner, I made the fatal flaw that many, many men make. I'm going to go take a nap. Woke up feeling even worse. I finished my shift. We knocked, like I said, 3 or 4 flights out. Leave the next morning. I was just super tired. My chest was hurting. In between this, I was having a lot of liver issues, which had not progressed to the worst they got, but I was having a lot of just health problems. A lot of lymphatic issues, some autoimmune stuff, but I left work to go to the ambulance. Got to the ambulance. I was like heaved over the steering wheel driving to work. Get there, go straight to the couch, lay down. One of our other trucks runs a call. I wake up with that, like, just, like punch in the chest. I go out. I was on the rescue truck by myself that day, run a 12 lead. And as I'm watching it print off, I see the asterisks. I was like, well, shoot. So it prints off, says that I have, I'm having the Widowmaker. And logically, I'm like, well, this monitor's broke. It was an old life pack. So
it can't be right.
Yeah, I take the monitor out of the truck because I've convinced myself that it's interference. And, put it on the ground. Still says asterisk, 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 acute MI. I put it on the hood of the truck. I'm literally like doing everything but putting it in the air and standing on one foot trying to get satellite signal. So I sent a copy of it to my captain, and I say, hey, what do you think about this? And he's like, whose is that? And I didn't say anything, and he texts me and he goes, is that yours? And so I call him and I said, hey, I think something's wrong. So they get me to the hospital. They do a quick echo, and I have 100% LAD blockage. I was, they couldn't break my pain. They were giving me fentanyl, Demerol, morphine. Being an addict, that stuff wasn't touching me.
Yeah.
I'm pouring sweat. I'm beyond panicked. Like, it's that life moment. So they get me up into a room, and they're like, hey, in the morning, you're going to have to go to the cath lab. They were super swamped. at the time, and they're like, they actually put me on my mom's floor. And if you ever want a humbling moment, be, high on, fentanyl, morphine, Demerol on your mom's unit, harassing her nurses because her son is a degenerate human being. That's a humbling moment. So,
Yeah.
like the movie Animal House, I was fat, sick, and drunk, and it led me there. So I went to the cath lab, had that flicker of light moment. I hugged my son goodbye for what I thought could be the last time. As a lot of us humans do, we worst case scenario everything. And rolling to the cath lab on my back, watching the lights go by, I knew that my son, if something happened, would know me as, just a drunk degenerate. And I was not the best parent at the time. I prioritize work, military, career, everything and everybody else partying and drinking over my kid. And, I go to the cath lab and I'm getting my groin shaved by some random stranger, which, you would have to pay extra for that in the Philippines. I'm getting my groin shaved and I'm like, what the F? Like, how did I get here? Right? What's going on? And, I did that normal, like, God, if there's a God up there, if you will let me live through this, I swear on everything, I'll quit being stupid. And come out of it, I wake up, the cath lab staff tries to kill me a second time. I'm joking, but my clot popped loose, and I kept telling the nurse I was peeing on myself, and I had a catheter. And they told me to go, and I said, no, I'm peeing on myself. I can feel it. And they pulled the blanket back, and I was bleeding everywhere. They think I don't remember it because they gave me some more Versed, but I very much remember it. And that was the beginning. I got discharged 3 or 4 days later. And I walked out of the hospital on a Saturday night. The sun was going down. The entrance to the hospital faces west, and I watched the sun go down, and nobody was there. I was by myself. I drove myself home to an empty house. It was the most solemn car ride I've ever had. I watched the sun go down, and knowing that I had to make some changes. I had some people come visit me in the hospital, while I was there, and oddly enough, my just beautifully gorgeous wife. A lot of people don't know that was the first time she and I ever hung out. I'd met her when she was in nursing school. I taught her ACLS class, and she came to visit me that night, and we were just friends. She was actually dating somebody at the time, but just came to check on me. And a lot of people started telling me, like, hey man, you've got to make some changes, and it's just when you do that, that intrinsic look, and you take an account of where you're at. I was just a lying, cheating, just no honor, no integrity human being. I mean, I was just a piece of garbage. It didn't matter what I was doing professionally. I didn't have any honor. I was a terrible parent. I'm a part-time dad anyway, and it just makes you realize a lot. And kind of like that Mike Tyson saying that everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And my punch in the mouth was getting my groin shaved by some random stranger.
Now, how old were you at this point?
28, 29? No,
20,
30. I was 30. Yeah.
30?
Yeah.
But 30 years old, complete block the LAD.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
When they did my echo, what was that, ultrasound tech, echoologist, whatever. The person that
yeah,
did
it's
my
an
echo
echo tech. Yeah.
looked at me and was like, "What in the hell have you been doing?"
Yeah, really.
And come to find out, a few months later, I was in stage 1 liver failure. A few months before, I'd been diagnosed with fatty liver, and they just told me to clean up my diet, and I just thought that meant eat, better cheeseburgers.
Higher quality.
Yeah, and I was just like, yeah, okay, doc. I was, having a lot of autoimmune issues, a lot of GI issues. I was bleeding so bad. Not to get too in depth, but I had damaged my body so much. I would wake up with blood in the bed from my rectum. Like, when I went to the bathroom, it looked like you had just, slaughtered an animal. And I was sick. I had, these like nickel sized lymphatic nodules coming up on the back of my neck and my head. And I was dying. And, even at the hospital, my blood work was so out of whack that one of the doctors asked me why my lactate was so high. And he said, "Do you exercise a lot?" And I looked at myself and I was like, "Do I look like I exercise a lot?" And I was just fat, sick, and dying. And, getting out of the hospital and, like I said, I went home to an empty house. And at that point, I'd ran off most of my friends, most of my decent friends, ran off any decent relationship, I'd had. And I sat at home for a few days, because I couldn't go to work. You can't fly for, I think it's like 2 weeks after having a calf. Even a lot of the people I work with didn't even check on me. And that's a sobering moment.
Yeah.
When you're just like, oh boy, like I have alienated myself from just being a maniac. And, my outlet was EMS. And, I would take the pain that I was feeling personally and project it professionally, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, just like, I was hard to handle. I was not, I'm a managerial nightmare, and it also brought up a lot of past trauma, and stuff that I had repressed for a long time. And, so that was kind of the beginning in 2014.
So that's your awakening moment, or one of several, and so you start to change some things. You start to do some things differently, and go into some of where you're like, okay, where do we begin?
Yeah, I knew that my liver problems were giving me probably the most issue. Obviously, I knew I had to get sober. I went to my mom's house. Asked if I could move back in. When I hear people talking about addiction and stuff, and I always like, my life was like the movie Hangover. I was at the point I was sleeping with a bottle of Jack Daniels in the nightstand. So in the middle of the night, I could get up and take a hit, and just so I could sleep through the night.
Wow.
And went to my mom's house. I detoxed in her spare bedroom because I couldn't afford to go to rehab. I'd have lost my job, and I detoxed, for a couple days, puking my toenails off. Started feeling a little bit better, just started trying to make a list. And I'm like, when when it's like when you look at a room that a kid's destroyed, and you're like, where in the hell do we start? You know that because
Oh yeah.
every time I talk to you, all your kids, like I see all of them running around. I'm like, how do y'all keep the wall standing? But it's like, you look at a
We
room,
hold them up.
yeah, you look at a room that a kid's destroyed, and I'm like, where do I begin? So,
Exactly.
um, I started, with going to a chiropractor, trying to get my back issues straight, so I didn't have to take pain meds, and
Mm.
I started self studying, um, you know, diet and nutrition, and just trying to heal myself, and going to counseling and realizing a lot of childhood stuff that I went through had led me to addiction and, just not loving myself, not feeling like I belonged, not feeling like I was good enough. And it's a slow process. I mean, like I said, I had screwed up a lot. I had pissed off a lot of people, alienated myself in a lot of groups, pissed off all my friends, screwed over friends. Um,
And
you know,
that's something to say for I and this is something I harp on with the stuff that I do, and I know you do too. But people they don't realize how unforgiving they are. I mean,
oh yeah,
and
we
that's the majority, and I'm in that group as well. It's not that Tony Falzone's no, we don't realize how unforgiving we are and how we alienate people who are the old life Daniel Mills type of people. And it's just it's uncanny because of, especially for us that are in the field of critical care medicine. It's like, what do we do? Well, we take care, detailed care of people, but and yet we judge, and it's really wild, just that dichotomy.
we pray for the same grace we refuse to give other people.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's still people this day I used to fly with at Lifesaver that when they see me, like you can see it in their face, like they hate my guts. And I publicly, I got on Facebook one night in 2014 and wrote a dissertation, almost like an apology note. I was super suicidal. A lot of people don't realize I'd had a pistol in my mouth 2 or 3 times. Um, I didn't want to live. I didn't. I was. Back then, we really didn't know about depression and anxiety and post traumatic stress, and I mean, we knew about it in a psychiatry type way, but not the open, honest conversations we have today.
Yeah.
And I started tackling the nutrition. I somehow convinced Kayla Fanning to be my girlfriend. Um, that
Bless her heart.
and she knows. Oh yeah, right. And she knows. Like Kayla coming into my life is probably what saved me the most. And she showed me a level of compassion and love and empathy that I had never felt before, and acceptance. And she started helping me. She goes, look, we got to get your health better, and we got to, I was going through a bankruptcy and my health was failing. I mean, I was a mess, and it led me down the vegan path because I mean my body just wasn't processing protein, so I had to go vegan for 3 years and heal my liver and start taking care of myself. I even got to the point where I couldn't drink caffeine because of my heart. And as I say, radical change takes radical change. And people ask me all the time, they're like, "Well, how did you do it?" It was simple. I was tired of my own bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? That was it. Like I just got tired, of looking in the mirror and hating what I saw. And it kind of not only helped me, but it also, because like you said, we just beat people up. We treat people like rental cars, as I talk about in my talks. We treat our brothers and sisters in this proverbial quote unquote brotherhood, sisterhood, like rental cars. And the people who are, you know, struggling, fighting for their life, we beat the hell out of them mentally, physically, emotionally. Um, it's a dog eat dog world. Police, fire, EMS, nursing, across the board.
Yeah.
So I got sober. In 2016, I felt like I wanted to do something more professionally. There was a very public aircraft crash in Alabama in March of, actually, tomorrow's the anniversary, oddly enough. Um, it was a very public aircraft crash. And, even though my life was falling apart, somehow professionally, some people still respected me enough to offer me an education director position over a helicopter and ground service. So I took it. There was this awakening moment, even then, that I was fighting. I was really struggling with my mental health, like my physical health and all that had really kind of come back. I was losing weight, working out, taking better care of myself, but I felt like something was missing. And kind of that woodpecker moment where they're like,
Yep.
hey, stupid, we're trying to tell you something if you'll listen. I didn't listen, so I took the education director spot, doing what I do best. I dove back in, working 100 plus hours a week. I left Lifesaver, went to a service in South Alabama, took as the education director and a full-time flight medic. So I had 2 full-time jobs still. I did some great things, and, we were rocking in education. I made a lot of mistakes for my first year in management, a lot of lessons. And I wish I'd have had Jocko back then. I'm like, dude, where were you in 2016? We did a lot of good stuff, man, like a lot of education, but something was missing. Even then, my wife, she keeps me grounded to this day, but she was like, Daniel, you're working too much. I was driving 4 hours round trip to work each day.
That's a lot.
Yeah, getting up at 3 a.m., QA, QI, and charts from the air and ground, driving 2 hours to work, teaching all day. I was just burning myself out. And, for the first time in my life, I wanted to prioritize my family. In 2016, I tubed 54 patients on the helicopter, 8 kids, coded 6 out of the 8. If you've been to my talk, the year before, I'd ran my burn baby flight.
Yeah.
My man Duke just turned 7. FYI,
that's awesome. That is so awesome.
But I was just struggling. I was struggling to maintain the quote unquote identity that I thought I wanted. November of 2016, my mental health kind of come to a head and landed up on I-85. Tubed an 11-year-old, bilateral needle decompressions, blood, TXA, the whole thing. He was ejected from a Boy Scout, man. Coded him the whole way to Montgomery. And for the first time ever, I left work in the middle of my shift. It was the day before the Iron Bowl, the Alabama-Auburn game. And for the first time ever, I knew that I didn't need to fly anymore. I fought it, and at that point, I used the excuse. I said, hey, I'm drowning in the education department. I had 375 plus employees and 2 helicopters. And I came off the aircraft, and I made it another about 4 months, and me and Kayla made the decision that I was going to step down and take a job at the fire department right by our house. And work on my mental health. I was having, nightmares, anxiety attacks, freaking, loss of confidence in my skill. I mean, just the typical mental health thing. And the end of March, I turned in my notice and took a job at the fire department by my house. And like I said earlier, I wish that was the end of all the fun stuff. But as we know, as life does, within a few weeks, I was going to get punched in the mouth.
So this is where, I guess the origination of the buddy check comes in, from this next event at the fire department.
Well, the buddy check had started a year and a half before, just as a Facebook page.
Was it okay?
Yeah,
All right.
I did.
So it wasn't at this point. It was prior to.
Yeah, I started the buddy check after my old partner David Ferris committed suicide. But all it was just there was like a couple of hundred, followers, page likes, whatever. I hate calling them followers. I sound like David Koresh. Live followers. Yeah, it had started. I really wasn't doing anything with it. I'd get on there every now and again and post some motivational videos, and hey, if you're not okay, reach out, do your buddy checks. But it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't. We were doing good stuff, but it wasn't anything crazy. I knew I was struggling so bad with depression. Going to the fire department was like a reprieve for me. Like I said, being a fireman was super easy to me. The fire chief there had recruited me to come down there for an education type job. Got there, was working as a line firefighter paramedic. I'd been there about 2 weeks, and we're on a call. And my brother texts me and says, we've got a family. I've got 6 brothers and sisters. We got a brother-sister family group text thread, and he said, which oddly enough, that's today.
Oh, wow.
He said, I just did CPR on Mom. She's on the way to Shelby, and that's Shelby Baptist. And we're coming off the call, and I had my bunker pants on, and I reached down and I checked my phone, and I'm like, what in the hell? So I call him. He doesn't answer. I call him again, and I said, hey, and my brother Tyler, he's kind of a goofy dude, but he's not, one to be dramatic. And he answers, and he said, hey, I don't know what happened. I just did CPR on Mom. She's on the way to the hospital. My station was right across the street from the hospital. So I just real nonchalantly, and I didn't realize how nonchalantly I said it till later on. I was in the back, and I said, hey, Cap, do you mind if we run by the hospital? I think my mom just died. And we get up there, and she's not there. I go running into the ER, and I said, and they all knew me. And I'm like, hey, is my mom coming in? And they're like, Daniel, we don't think so. There's a code coming in, but other than that, we don't have anybody here. And this same hospital Mom had worked at for 30 years as a nurse. And I see the ambulance pull up. And as a lot of us have done, I looked through the back window of a truck I used to work on and saw a medic and a volunteer fireman doing CPR on somebody. And I watched them pull my mom out, out of a truck I had ridden for, 5, 6, 7+ years. I watched her roll her by, and she just looked like a typical train wreck cardiac arrest patient. And, that's where a lot really changed. I watched them code her for a few hours. They got a pulse back, but she was brain dead. And they're like, hey, we can swing for the fence, send her to the cath lab, but we don't know. So they got her up to the unit, and, surrounded by her kids, we decided to take her off of life support. And I had that weird moment looking at all my brothers and sisters, and I looked at my wife, and my exact words, I said, I fucked up. And she just looked. She was like, "No, you're fine." And I just kept repeating that over and over again because I was just like, "I just want more time. I want more time." Watch mom take her last breath, and it changed me. I don't think that prepares. There's nothing to prepare anybody for that.
Yeah.
And we watched her take her last breath, and that was it. I'd realized that I missed my brothers and sisters growing up. They were all adults and married, and I realized that I just screwed up a lot with my family, and I was never there. I wasn't there for my mom because I was always working. And even the next shift, the fire department offered me bereavement, and I didn't even take off the next shift after my mom died. Like, that's just the kind of person I was. And that led to some very severe anxiety attacks leaving the house. Like, the next morning that I was supposed to go to work, I was sitting in the driveway. I didn't want to leave my family. Like, I was shaking, crying, screaming, in my car in the driveway. I didn't want to leave my family. My mom had texted me an hour and a half before she died, and I ignored it, and I just said, I'll call her, tomorrow.
Yeah.
And, like I say, you have to be disrupted to be awakened. And, after that, like, the guilt and shame, and, my mom was a rock star. I mean, she was a freaking legend in the Baptist health nursing system. And, I got really depressed. I was sober, so I didn't have that outlet. My life was just like numb. And like we do with as brothers and sisters in emergency services, we don't help people out. And I started getting in trouble at work for being quiet and kind of withdrawn, and my job performance, quote unquote, had dropped as a rookie. And about 4 months after my mom died, I lost my job, and that was a big, just FU moment in my life.
Kind of kick in the teeth, yeah.
Yeah, and when you're fighting for your life, and just fighting each day to survive and not give up, and then what little you do have is just taken from you. That lets you know where you're at. And in between all this, at the same fire department, and that's what's crazy, at the same fire department the year before, I gave the mental health talk, the buddy check talk, to the entire command staff, lieutenants, captains, chiefs, assistant chiefs, battalion chiefs, the whole nines. And I'd even, during all this, I was like, I'm really depressed. Like, and I'd even told my chief that, and I said, I'm just down. And he was a friend, and he looked at me one day, and I'll never forget it. And he said, it sounds like pity.
Wow.
And I was just like, okay. And as a lot of us do with mental health, we go inward. We shut down.
Yep.
We go inside, we go dark, as a lot of people, like to say. So, so when I came out of that meeting, my stuff was thrown in a box out on the front porch, and I was told never to come back, not to be on property. And just because of mental health. I had not failed a drug test. I'd not stolen anything. I'd not missed work. I'd not been late for work. just, I mean, it is just a crazy thing to go through when, when seemingly your mental health is falling apart around you.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you got a problem. Well, get your stuff and get out. We don't
Uh,
want problem people here.
yeah, they got it for me. It was in a brown cardboard box out on the front porch.
So they did you a favor.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it wasn't even like neatly packed.
Oh
It
man.
was thrown in a car. I had a guy with a gun, an armed fire marshal, escort me to my car. Like I was, it was eye opening to say the least. But
Wow.
on the way home, you know, I had made the decision. I was just like, I'm gonna suck start my pistol.
Mm.
My friend, mentor Alan Rice called me because I think he knew because I texted him in the meeting when I was being fired. I was like, well, yep, this is happening today.
Wow.
And, he called me and my wife was at work and I just texted her and I said, hey, babe, I'm heading home. And my wife's the most bubbly, positive, upbeat person. And she's like, well, this is great. This is fixable. We're going to be fine, babe. I love you. I'm proud of you. Everything that I'd accomplished, I put a lot into my career. A lot of my identity stemmed from my title. And as Alan Rice told me, he said, you're not your title. You're not your failures. You're not your success. That's not who you are. And in between all this, I'd already been in the process of getting hired back on the helicopter. So I went to Air Evac, just because.
Because you could.
I had to.
Yeah.
I had missed medicine. I'm not a fireman.
Well, like you said, you got bored.
Yeah, and if I'm not challenged intellectually, it's not a physical thing. I can do the physical job as a fire. Like that's easy to me. It's an intellectual challenge, and it took me a long time and a lot of screwing up to understand that. Like I have to challenge myself intellectually. I'm a very my brain works a lot like Nikola Tesla's or Einstein. Like I'm extremely disorganized. I put stuff off. I mean, I'm a rabid procrastinator, but I have a very high IQ, and as we know, that doesn't always work well in non-challenging and non-intellectually challenging environments. So
yeah,
I went back to flying. Even then, just with my mental health, you can fake the funk. I have a hard time getting along with people that don't have the same drive and motivation. It's an ego thing. And hearing David Goggins speak really opened my eyes to, oh man, like not everybody, I can't expect everybody to be like me.
Yeah.
Not lowering your expectations or your standards, but not everybody is me. Not everybody cares about medicine like at the level I did. And that, like I said, I've always joked about it, but I'm a managerial nightmare. I'm very brash, and that's not always, widely accepted. Like I didn't get in trouble, but I just always butted heads with partners. And, my manager right before I quit, and we'll get to that, but, he told me, he's like, you're great in the helicopter, just around here. He's like, it's like there's two different Daniels. I'd try to post inspirational stuff on Facebook and on the buddy check stuff. And I meant it, but a lot of times I was doing that for myself, and it was like I was giving myself my own medicine. And, then
which doesn't taste good a lot of times.
No, but I would post something like, "Hey, hold on," and it was really more just I'm telling myself to hold on. And it I would butt heads with partners because they didn't know as much as I did, or I would butt heads with partners because I felt like they should know stuff, and I had moved, like David Goggins said, I'd moved from the teacher to the beater. Like, I'd be like, why don't you know this? This is textbook day one critical care information. How do you not know this? And we can't treat people like that. So, in turn, I had started treating not everybody, but partners that I felt like had been doing this long enough and should know this. And, I started treating them as I'd been treated in the past.
Hmm.
And it just hit me one day, tubing a guy last June or July. I actually texted you that day and I just said, I'm done. Like,
Yeah, I remember that.
I don't want to do this anymore. I hate this job. I work for what I feel like was one of the best companies that are personnel wise, and education and all that. But I just didn't want to do it anymore. I had lost my fire. And it wasn't just like a burnout thing. I was done. So I turned in my notice. I talked to my wife. We'd been wanting to travel. Anybody that knows us knows we're traveling hippies anyway. Uh, and had a couple of near misses in the helicopter. One pretty significant one in July. So a week later, I turned my notice in. My wife took a travel job, and we just started traveling.
Yeah. Now, and since then, I mean, you've everything from being recognized at Fast 19.
Come on.
And a lot of the speaking engagements, and you've scaled back some of quite a bit of speaking, which I know, with our conversation and just where you and I are at with the Spartan Wellness Group and everything that we're doing now, but mainly because it was affecting the home front. It was more than just, okay, you're not flying anymore. It's doing all these speaking engagements and all this other stuff, and I know you recognize there's got to be a balance here.
Yeah, and even before I quit flying, like I was just burned out with speaking. Like it was almost like an ego thing, but
mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm tired. I knew it at Pipe Stem at the Echo conference. I was done. I love it. It takes a lot out of me, brings up a lot of bad memories. But I was speaking multiple times a month, all over the place. Like I knew for once in my life I was going to have to prioritize my family, and that meant walking away from everything. In the midst of all that, I gained my yoga cert, my ACE personal trainer, my nutrition coaching cert. I was resisting a big life change that was going to come one way or another, and my wife supports me, and it wasn't like a hey, if you don't change this, it was just an internal. We had our daughter, and I didn't want to make the same mistakes, so I literally said I'm going to do 5 speaking engagements a year, and I've held to that for almost 2 years now. I'm very selective of what I let take time from my family.
Yeah.
And that led to you and I creating the Spartan Wellness Group because of a need, and our own, both of us, our own personal, successes, failures, struggles, any of that.
Well, and it's, a lot of what you've done has helped me see that I need to be selective in what I'm getting after. Because there's 2 things with that is if you have so much going on, you cannot truly dedicate the amount of time and energy to do something in a great way. If you've got 10 things in your shopping cart or however you want to do the illustration, if you got 10 things, but you can really only do 3 of those exceptionally well, the other 7, they're just going to fall by the wayside. And then it's going to be a lackadaisical effort for those. So so if you've got your family, and they're the top priority. You know, you've got your faith, your family, and then whatever else you're doing in another venture, and you got all this other stuff. Something's going to give.
Well, yeah, and we
Uh,
always put our faith and family on the back burner. Those are normally the
yeah,
first two to go. And, it may hurt your quote unquote career to put your family first. But those are the people, when it's all said and done, who are going to be crying around your casket. Uh,
yeah,
it's not going to be your manager, your fire chief, your police chief. They may be upset, but you're replaceable. We're not as a lot of people are finding out during this pandemic. We're not as essential as we like to say we are.
yeah. I mean, who would have thought that nurses would be laid off?
My wife lost her job, as you know, last week as a
Yeah.
critical care ICU nurse, and the people who are going to be crying around your casket are the people you need to focus on, and that's who I focus on. I think you and I have a very healthy work-life balance. But
much more than ever before.
yeah, but the way that I ran or still run the 911 Buddy Check project, and the way that we run Spartan Wellness Group is based off, physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional balance. There's a lot of people in the mental health world that talk about mental health from a very one-sided perspective, and it's not. There's multiple ingredients that go into baking a cake, and
you can't dismiss that. I mean, you can't dismiss those parts of it.
No, and it's like right now with COVID, we're dismissing the immunity part of fighting off an infection, and this isn't a COVID thing, but with mental health, if you're not addressing sleep deprivation, diet and nutrition, gut microbiome, inflammation, going to counseling, peer support,
Yeah,
rest, hydration. I mean, there's studies that say just 1% decrease in hydration has an increase on mental health issues. 1%. All right. Hell, everybody's dehydrated.
yeah,
So, you can't just you have to add all the variables in. It's like Common Core math. Like, you have to do the work. You have to show the work. You have to, branch off of, well, is my depression caused from a hormonal imbalance, or is it caused just from me resisting, not addressing childhood trauma? Is, my depression, a gut microbiome inflammation issue, or, me not talking about the cause or sleep deprivation? There's so many people in mental health that don't talk about all sides of the recipe. They don't talk about, that's why we deem the term the four mountains. The mental, emotional aspect, the physical, the spiritual aspect.
yep,
If you're questioning your religion and angry at God, that's going to cause an imbalance on your mental and emotional state, because you feel like, well, if God is not here for me, what else the hell do I have? If your physical health is flailing, that's going to affect your mental and emotional state. If you're sleep deprived, that affects your hormones, your testosterone, your estrogen. It affects your insulin. It affects your growth fat, your growth hormones. It affects, the way your brain operates. It affects how you, receive and perceive traumas. Yet we have a very one-sided conversation in mental health right now. Like, let's put, just talk about the doom and gloom. Well, no, we have to address your hormonal imbalances. We have to address your nutrition. If you're eating a high carb, high sugar diet, that's going to cause mental and emotional. It is, evidence based data. Like, it's not, it's like the immunity thing. You and I both have been attacked for saying, yes, COVID is dangerous, but we need to boost our immunity.
yeah,
In the mental health world, when you say, well, your depression may be because of a hormonal imbalance, which is easily fixable. or your depression maybe, or your post-traumatic stress may be a fact of you're sleep deprived and your body's not meant to be sleep deprived. Our bodies are not designed for sleep deprivation. That's science. We don't address that. But that's one thing that I've tried to do from very early on of the 911 Buddy Check project, and with Spartan Wellness Group. You do it with the Motivated Medic. You have to address this stuff, because if you don't, all you're doing is masking the symptoms. You're not addressing the root cause.
Well, and it's interesting because I've thought about this when I was sick. And I don't mean like any particular time, but it's funny how when we're sick, like you were sick for what 6 weeks plus, right after the first of the new year, and I know like when I'm sick, if I've got bronchitis or whatever, it's really hard to think about how we felt when we were well, and you get into that mindset of I'm miserable, I feel horrible. When you are in an unhealthy circumstance, it's much more challenging to do that reach to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do the things that are going to help me get better. You and I talked about this, like, when I'm sick, what do I want to eat? I want to eat junk food. I want those quote unquote comfort foods.
Yeah.
And it was like the light bulb came on where you're like, why don't you eat healthy? It's like,
I told you, I said, eat a keto diet when you were sick. And you told me the same thing. You fed it back to me a few weeks later. Yeah. Because when you're in the fog of war, you're not thinking, and that goes with depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, suicidal thoughts, obsessive compulsive disorder, whatever. When you're in the fog of war mentally, you're not thinking about that stuff. When, and hopefully we'll find out soon for sure if I have the antibodies, but everybody pretty much across the board is pretty sure I had COVID back in February. And in the fog of war, I was like, I know I need to take an ice bath right now, that would boost my immune system. I knew that, vitamin C, zinc, and all that would help. I couldn't do it. I didn't want to. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to do the stuff I knew to do other than just lay on the couch puking my guts up with a temp of 103. And I ended up in the hospital, with bilateral pneumonia. But when you're in the fog of war, we lose, reason and common sense and rationale, and objectivity. And you have to break, control the chaos in the fog of war, and do what you need to do. And in mental health, that's going to a counselor, going to a psychiatrist, peer support, talking to a safe friend, exercising, eating nutritionally like foods, eating good fats, good healthy carbohydrates, good proteins, doing the stuff that we know works.
And this is exactly where the Spartan Wellness Group comes into play. And I'm going to put a big plug in here because of the fact that, you and I want to come alongside people and say, you can do this. And you have people that are willing to stand up alongside of you and give you the resources to do this and to encourage you and to say, no, you can accomplish this. You can, go from being a wanderer like you were to being a warrior. But you've got to have the right tools, and you got to have those people alongside of you that will say, that'll kind of keep you on the straight and narrow, so to speak. And that's a lot of what you and I both do in both our individual ventures, but collectively, especially now, because we've been there. We've been through the addiction issues. We've been through the family turmoil, the career disruption, and our health being very very in our face with, if you don't do something, it's going to change it for you, and
Yeah.
not in a good way.
And I know people, when they're depressed and dealing with suicidal thoughts and all that, they don't want to hear, hey, this is a simple fix. Go eat right, exercise, move your body, go to counseling, go do EMDR therapy, go to a ketamine clinic, go to, whatever. They don't want to hear that. A lot of people just want to be in their feelings, but from the get go, even of the buddy check, I said, I don't want to just post stories. I don't want to just post pictures. I'm not just going to be an echo chamber for mental health. We're going to offer strategies and solutions, right? Evidence based, backed, strategies and solutions to help people, not just heal and survive, but to thrive post post traumatic stress injury or post, suicide attempts, post, divorce, whatever. And I mean, we focus mentally, spiritually, physically, and emotionally, and on your relationships with, your friends, family, your finances.
Yeah. So I mean, the end goal of this, it's like the end goal of somebody going to the hospital that's really sick. The end goal, it should be at least, of the entire healthcare team is to optimize the viability of that patient so that they can go home and continue living, and not just living just to exist, but to live well. And that's we don't want you to the people that are listening to this to just keep on going and be like, okay, yeah, I'm existing. I don't want you to exist. We don't want you to just exist. And anybody can sit on the couch and push a remote. It takes that radical change to get up off your rear end and to start do some things to make a positive impact in the lives of the people. And that's our whole goal here, is to to live to your max potential.
Well, and that's why I say wage war. It's in all my posts. A lot of people roll their eyes. A lot of people unfollowed me when I started talking about waging war. And I I always have to throw the caveat. I'm not telling you to go, wage war on some old man on the sidewalk. But, when you're in the fog of war, and the chaos, and you have to wage war mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. You have to wage war on radical change, because radical change is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm speaking from experience. I'm not speaking from theory. When I tell you, you have to wage war, this is coming from somebody who lost a job, who's lost a parent and grandparents, two of my best friends, who went through a bankruptcy, who walked away from an 18-year career that I built up because it was no longer serving me. You have to wage war, on your relationships and fighting for your marriage and fighting for your, what's important.
Yeah.
When I say you have to wage war, when you're suicidal, you have to wage war on those thoughts. When you're depressed, you have to wage war on the excuses that you're not going to go get help. You're not going to go talk to a counselor. You have to wage war on finding out why and doing a root cause analysis of why you are where you are. You have to wage war every single day, because life will beat you to your freaking knees at some point or another in your life. And you have two choices. You can let it beat the hell out of you, beat you down, or no matter how far off, how down, how beat up, how near death you are, Rocky of round 14, just beat to hell and back. No matter how far down you are, you can always get back up.
Yeah. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this podcast with you, because you were there. You were on death's door a few times, be it the cath lab or the suicide.
Well, yeah, and I mean, life's gonna, just like this last week. My wife losing her job. She's a travel nurse. She made daggum good money. We handled it really well. I mean, I had about 6 hours of being really pissed off and, just but then, actually one of my clients and you were like, "Hey, buddy, you need to open that bottle of medicine you give to everybody else." And I was fine. I went for a run, did some went and worked out, and I felt better. I mean, it sucks, but you adapt and you overcome. But I don't deal with excuses. People that I interact with, they always want to give me excuses of why they can't. And this, I'm telling you, this is coming from somebody, early childhood, mental, physical, emotional, and sexual trauma, addiction, 15 plus years, sleeping on the streets, losing a job, losing friends, being a liar, a coward, having no integrity. This is coming from somebody who went through a bankruptcy at 30 years old. Lost everything I had, everything that I'd worked for to fight for. Having not even having two pennies to rub together. From having a pistol in my mouth multiple times, wanting to die. I think about suicide all the time, even now. But I don't let it manifest into a reality. Like when I talk, I'm not speaking on theory. And there's a lot of people in this echo chamber of mental health. They just talk on theory or something they read in a book. Kind of like David Goggins said, I'm not talking on theory. I know what the human body and mind can go through. I know the pain. It's like Thoreau said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And while men like Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, talked about surviving one of probably the most horrific event in human history, he survived it because of hope and not giving up. Viktor Frankl talked about a lot of the Jewish people who just gave up and, just volunteered to go to the gas chamber. And he's still here to tell his message, as is Rose Schindler. Listen to the Rose Schindler Jocko podcast. You want to tell me about excuses? Get out of my face.
Yeah.
I may be brash and I may not be what a lot of people in fire and EMS want to hear in the mental health. This isn't all Care Bears, roses and pillows. Mental health and depression and anxiety and addiction and abuse is not pretty. It's not meant to be pretty. It's not meant to be fluffy. And I don't care if the Buddy Check page and the Spartan Wellness never grows to anything more than what it is right now. If the people we're getting to and the people that you and I have seen recover going through our programs, if our message reaches just one person, I don't care about fame, fortune. Like I said, I know our message isn't for everybody. I've had people, friends, mentors, people I look up to in the the EMS world tell me that I am too much for their people, even though I am their people. I know our message isn't for everybody, but by God, the ones that it is for, we're going to freaking wage war on radical change. We're going to get after it because that's what you have to do. You can't just lay there fat, sick, and nearly dead expecting your life to change. That's not how this works. You have to get after it and wage war every day. And I wage war every day. This morning, I didn't feel good when I woke up. My back's hurting, but I had to get up. I had to do what I know that works. And you can't just lay down. You can't just quit, give up. You got to keep going. Life's hard. Life is really hard. And we're finding that out right now. But if you have perspective, look at the Holocaust. Compared to what they went through, what we're going through right now, this is easy. It's a little inconvenient. There's a couple of cities getting hit really hard, and they're going through some bad stuff. But it's teaching us lessons. And like you said, when we are sick, it makes us reflect on how we felt when we were well.
Yeah.
Right now we're being disrupted to be awakened. So the next step in this is the awakening, the action, the radical change. So what are you going to do with it? People tell me all the time, all this bad, horrific shit that happened to them. Good. What are you going to do with it? What are you talking about? What are you going to do with it? It's like Bobby Boucher. It's tackling fuel.
Yep.
You know, what are you going to do with it? What do I do with being sexually molested, you know, as a young kid by numerous people? You're going to do something with it. You're not going to let something like that happen to your kids. You're going to help other people. You know, what do you do with post-traumatic stress and suicide attempts? You help other people.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's exactly it. I mean, even though the things that most of us, if not all of us, have gone through, there's things in our lives that are horrible, horrific things, but it doesn't stop there. That's not where the story ends. And recognizing that that's just the beginning is essential in having a warrior mindset. That is the defining moment there, in understanding that, okay, yeah, my that point of my life was pretty messed up. But there's a comma there, not a period. You know, you've talked about, and Dana mentioned this, I think in her last blog post, where, you know, what are we doing with that dash between the years? You know, what happened between our birth and whenever we stop breathing? And that's, you know, that's it. Well, I think this is a good point to close it out, man. I love you, buddy. I really appreciate you being vulnerable with the podcast, and I know you've shared the story with other people. But this really brings into perspective for those that don't really know your story, where you get your motivation and your discipline for life with how we need to do things. So I really appreciate you talking about that. And you know, like I said, you're a brother, and I really appreciate you as everything from the clinical aspect to to us doing this Spartan Wellness Group thing together. And we've got some going forward. We've got some significant opportunity, and people are going to see more and more of what Daniel Mills and Tony Falzone can do with this. It's exciting. These are exciting times. So I'm excited. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for where you've been. Thankful for Kayla and for B and just the influences for that we have in our own lives, for my wife and my kids. This is going to be good. Even better going forward. So, but thanks for being on the podcast and sharing your story, and sharing, going from being a wanderer to being a warrior and waging war in your life every day.
I appreciate you having me, man. And, like I said, no matter how far down, gone, broke, whatever sick you are, you can always, create radical change. Let that pain be a catalyst for radical change in your life. So love you, man. And hope y'all have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon.
For more information, look up Motivated Medic on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or go to motivatedmedic.com.